Darek Moncrief pressed his palm against the biometric scanner, and the reinforced steel door hissed open to reveal something that shouldn't exist in a decommissioned nuclear silo. Banks of quantum processors hummed in climate-controlled chambers, their blue LED arrays casting an eerie glow across walls that were supposed to be bare concrete. 3 monitors displayed real-time satellite feeds of his property perimeter, while a 4th tracked encrypted communications he shouldn't have access to. His morning routine shattered when a red light blinked on his private network hub, indicating an unauthorized probe attempt from an IP address registered to the Department of Homeland Security. Yesterday, the government had no idea what he was doing down here. Today, someone was trying to crack his digital defenses. The silo stretched 40 feet down into the Montana bedrock, purchased 18 months ago from a government surplus auction for what most people would consider pocket change. Darek had told the auctioneer he planned to convert it into an underground retreat, a place to escape the noise and chaos of modern society. That part was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. The concrete walls that once housed nuclear missiles now protected something far more valuable and infinitely more dangerous to the established order. He descended the spiral metal staircase, his footsteps echoing through chambers that had been designed to withstand direct nuclear strikes. The main living area occupied the former command center, complete with original communications equipment he'd modified for his own purposes. Banks of servers lined the walls, processing data streams from sources around the globe. His engineering background had made the technical aspects straightforward, but the legal implications of what he was doing kept him awake most nights. The surface access point remained deliberately primitive. A single dirt road led to what appeared to be an abandoned maintenance shed, complete with rusted equipment and weathered warning signs. Anyone driving past would see exactly what Darek wanted them to see. Nothing worth investigating. The real entrance lay hidden beneath a false floor in the shed, accessible only through a sequence of security protocols he'd designed himself. His coffee grew cold as he studied the intrusion logs. Someone with significant resources and government-level clearance had spent the last 6 hours systematically probing his network defenses. They hadn't broken through yet, but their techniques suggested federal involvement. Darek's modifications to the silo's infrastructure had been careful and legal, but the data he was collecting might tell a different story to the wrong people. The secure satellite uplink crackled to life with an incoming transmission from his contact in Washington. Agent Harwick's voice cut through the static with military precision. "Mr. Moncrief, we need to talk about your recent activities. There are concerns about your site's compliance with federal security regulations." Darek stared at the communication terminal, understanding that his carefully constructed isolation was about to come to an abrupt end. The question wasn't whether they would come for him, but how much time he had to prepare for their arrival. Darek cut the transmission without responding, his mind racing through contingency plans he'd hoped never to implement. Agent Harwick's call meant they'd already identified him as a person of interest, which gave him maybe 12 hours before federal vehicles appeared on his access road. He pulled up the property deed on his primary workstation, confirming what he already knew. His purchase of the decommissioned silo was completely legal, documented through proper government channels, and included mineral rights extending 200 feet in every direction. The quantum processors continued their calculations, analyzing data streams from environmental monitoring stations across 14 western states. Darek's crusade had started 3 years ago when his younger sister Emma called from their hometown in North Dakota, her voice breaking as she described the cancer cluster affecting a dozen families on their street. The official government report blamed natural mineral deposits, but Emma's neighborhood sat directly downstream from an industrial waste site that had been declared clean by federal inspectors. She died 8 months later, and Darek had spent every day since then hunting for the truth that might have saved her. His specialized knowledge made the patterns obvious once he started looking. Government pollution reports showed systematic irregularities, with discrepancies between official statements and actual contamination levels. The processing power required to prove corporate collusion with federal agencies existed in only 3 places: the Pentagon, the NSA, and now his converted missile silo. He activated the emergency protocols, initiating a controlled shutdown of all non-essential systems while maintaining core operations. The satellite uplink would remain active for incoming intelligence, but outgoing transmissions would route through 7 different encryption layers and 3 offshore servers. If they wanted to accuse him of violating federal security regulations, he would make sure his evidence reached the right people first. The surface monitoring array painted a clear picture of his immediate surroundings. Motion sensors detected nothing larger than prairie dogs within a 3-mile radius, but thermal imaging from his modified weather balloon showed vehicle exhaust signatures on Highway 2, approximately 15 miles east and moving in his direction. Too early to be certain, but the convoy size and heat signatures suggested government vehicles rather than local traffic. Darek descended to the lower storage level, where steel cabinets held printed copies of every document his systems had processed. Digital evidence could be deleted or dismissed as fabricated, but court-admissible paper trails were harder to discredit. Each folder contained detailed analysis of specific contamination events, cross-referenced with corporate financial records and federal inspection reports. The pattern revealed a systematic cover-up involving 3 major chemical companies and at least 2 Environmental Protection Agency regional directors. His secure phone buzzed with an incoming call from Ezra Timberton, his constitutional law attorney in Billings. Darek had retained Ezra's services 6 months ago, ostensibly for property law consultation, but actually as insurance against exactly this situation. The lawyer's voice carried professional calm with an undercurrent of concern. "Darek, I just received an interesting call from a federal prosecutor asking about your legal representation status. Someone's building a case." The admission confirmed Darek's worst fears. They weren't coming to investigate his compliance with security regulations. They were coming to stop him from revealing information that could bring down careers and cost corporations billions in cleanup costs. His isolation from society had been deliberate preparation for this moment, but now he faced a choice between abandoning his mission or fighting a legal battle he might not survive. Ezra's warning gave Darek the confirmation he needed to activate his final contingency plan. He ended the call and immediately began uploading encrypted data packets to servers in 3 different countries, each containing pieces of evidence that would mean nothing individually but paint a damning picture when assembled together. The upload would take 4 hours to complete, assuming his satellite connection remained stable and uncompromised. The thermal imaging feed showed the convoy had turned off Highway 2 onto the county road that led directly to his property. 4 vehicles moving in formation at exactly 55 miles per hour, maintaining precise spacing that suggested military or federal training. Darek estimated their arrival time at approximately 90 minutes, which gave him enough time to secure his most sensitive materials and prepare for what would likely be an aggressive interrogation. He descended to the lowest level of the silo, where a hidden chamber behind the original missile guidance systems contained his most critical discovery. 3 years of satellite data had revealed a pattern of illegal dumping across federal lands in Montana, Wyoming, and North Dakota. Chemical companies were using remote locations to dispose of industrial waste, confident that government inspectors would never venture into areas marked as environmentally sensitive or culturally protected. The conspiracy involved falsified inspection reports, bribed officials, and systematic contamination of groundwater systems that supplied drinking water to over 200,000 people. Darek sealed the evidence chamber using a mechanical lock system that couldn't be defeated by electronic surveillance or hacking attempts. The physical documents would remain hidden unless someone knew exactly where to look and had the correct sequence to open multiple security barriers. He'd designed the system to be discoverable by legitimate investigators, but impossible for government agents operating under questionable authority. The surface monitoring array detected engine noise from the approaching convoy, but something was wrong. Darek had expected standard federal vehicles, possibly FBI or EPA investigators. Instead, his thermal imaging revealed military-grade jamming equipment and what appeared to be electromagnetic pulse devices mounted on the lead vehicle. They weren't just coming to search his property. They were planning to disable his entire operation before he could transmit his evidence. His carefully constructed contingency plans hadn't accounted for this level of technological warfare. Agent Celeste Harwick's voice crackled through his communications array again, this time with less diplomatic courtesy. "Mr. Moncrief, we're approaching your location with a federal search warrant. We need you to exit your facility immediately and present yourself for questioning regarding violations of security protocols." Darek studied the approaching vehicles through his surveillance feeds. Black SUVs with government plates, each carrying 4 agents in tactical gear. Their formation and equipment suggested they expected resistance, which meant someone had convinced them he was dangerous rather than simply non-compliant. He activated his legal recording protocols and prepared to discover exactly what authority they claimed to possess and whether their warrant would specify the scope of their intended search. Darek emerged from the maintenance shed as the 4 black SUVs arranged themselves in a semicircle around his property. Agent Harwick stepped from the lead vehicle, a tall woman in her late 30s with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to federal authority being unquestioned. She held a folded document in her left hand, while keeping her right hand near her service weapon, a gesture that wasn't lost on Darek's surveillance cameras. "Mr. Moncrief, I'm Agent Celeste Harwick with the Department of Homeland Security. We have a federal search warrant authorizing us to inspect your property for violations of national security protocols." She extended the document toward him, but her eyes remained fixed on the seemingly innocent maintenance shed behind him. "We have reason to believe you're operating unauthorized communications equipment and accessing classified government databases." Darek accepted the warrant and began reading carefully, noting several concerning details immediately. The document authorized a search for electronic surveillance equipment, unauthorized communications devices, and classified materials, but it failed to specify the legal basis for their suspicion or provide evidence of actual wrongdoing. More importantly, the warrant was signed by a judge in the Eastern District of Virginia rather than Montana, which raised serious questions about jurisdiction and forum shopping. "Agent Harwick, this warrant appears to be improperly executed. You're operating outside your jurisdiction, and the scope of authorized search seems deliberately vague." Darek kept his voice calm and professional, knowing that his recording equipment was capturing every word of their exchange. "I'm happy to cooperate with a legitimate investigation, but I need to see proper identification from all agents and documentation of your authority to operate in Montana." The agent's expression hardened, as she realized Darek wasn't going to be intimidated into immediate compliance. She gestured to her team, and 12 agents emerged from the vehicles, each carrying electronic detection equipment and what appeared to be sophisticated surveillance devices. Their coordination suggested they'd been briefing on his property layout, which meant someone had been conducting surveillance operations without his knowledge. "Mr. Moncrief, we have authority to search any structures on this property that might contain the equipment specified in our warrant. That includes any underground facilities or storage areas you might have constructed." Harwick's tone carried an implicit threat as she stepped closer to the maintenance shed. "We can do this cooperatively, or we can execute our warrant with whatever force becomes necessary." Darek positioned himself between the agents and the shed entrance, realizing his electromagnetic pulse concerns were about to be tested. "Agent Harwick, your warrant doesn't mention underground facilities specifically. Without proper legal authority, any attempt to breach my property beyond what's explicitly authorized would be federal trespassing." But as he spoke, he noticed one agent assembling what looked like a portable EMP device near the tree line. They hadn't come just to search. They'd come to shut him down permanently, warrant or no warrant. His 3 years of preparation suddenly felt inadequate against equipment he'd never seen before. The EMP device activated without warning, sending a pulse through Darek's surface surveillance systems that should have disabled every electronic component within 100 yards. Instead, his equipment continued functioning normally, protected by the Faraday cage design built into the original missile silo specifications. Agent Harwick's surprise was visible as her team reported that their electromagnetic attack had failed completely, leaving Darek's defensive systems fully operational. "Impossible. That should have fried everything he's got running." The agent speaking into his radio wasn't trying to hide his confusion from Darek, who realized they'd seriously underestimated both his technical knowledge and the natural advantages of living inside a structure designed to survive nuclear war. "Ma'am, we need to reassess our approach." Harwick signaled her team to advance toward the maintenance shed, but Darek activated his legal countermeasures before they could reach the entrance. High-definition cameras began streaming live footage to 3 civil rights organizations and his attorney's office, while directional microphones captured every word spoken by federal agents on his property. The recordings would provide evidence of any constitutional violations, assuming he survived the encounter to use them in court. "Agent Harwick, you're being recorded. Any attempt to enter my underground facility without specific legal authority will be documented and transmitted to my legal counsel." Darek kept his voice steady, but his heart rate was climbing as he watched 12 heavily armed agents surrounding his position. "Your warrant doesn't specify underground structures, which means you need additional authorization to breach my primary residence." The lead agent ignored his warning and began cutting through the lock on the shed entrance. Darek had expected this moment for months, But the reality felt more dangerous than his contingency planning had prepared him for. The agents weren't behaving like law enforcement conducting a legitimate investigation. They were moving with the precision and aggression of a military unit executing a raid on enemy territory. Mr. Moncrief, step away from the entrance immediately. We have reason to believe this facility contains evidence of federal crimes, and we're authorized to use necessary force to secure the area. Harwick's hand moved to her service weapon as she spoke, a gesture that crossed the line from legal intimidation into actual threat of violence. Darek backed away from the shed as the agents breached the surface entrance, knowing that the real test of his preparations was about to begin. The steel door leading down to his silo would require cutting tools to penetrate, giving him precious minutes to implement his final defensive strategy. His underground facility contained 3 years of evidence, documenting environmental crimes that could destroy careers and cost corporations billions in cleanup costs. The government's willingness to use military-grade equipment and threats of violence proved they were acting on behalf of interests far more powerful than federal law enforcement agencies. The sound of plasma cutters echoing from the shed told Darek they'd found the real entrance to his underground facility. In less than 10 minutes, federal agents would breach the most secure location in Montana, and everything would depend on whether his evidence reached the right people before they could destroy it. Darek descended into his silo as sparks from the plasma cutters illuminated the stairwell above him. The agents were cutting through 3 inches of hardened steel, which would take them approximately 8 minutes to breach completely. He activated his emergency transmission protocol, uploading the most damaging evidence files to servers in Iceland, Switzerland, and New Zealand, while his quantum processors worked to complete the environmental contamination analysis that had taken him 3 years to compile. The secure communication system crackled with an incoming call from an unlisted number. Darek hesitated before answering, knowing that anyone with access to his encrypted channels possessed either government clearance or sophisticated hacking capabilities. The voice that emerged was older, authoritative, and carried the distinctive accent of corporate America's upper echelons. Mr. Moncrief, this is Harrison Blackstone, CEO of Meridian Industrial Solutions. I believe we need to discuss your recent research activities before this situation escalates further. The name hit Darek like a physical blow. Meridian was one of the 3 companies his evidence implicated in the illegal dumping conspiracy, and Blackstone was personally named in documents showing he'd authorized payments to federal inspectors. Mr. Blackstone, I have nothing to discuss with you. Your company has been contaminating groundwater across 4 states while bribing government officials to falsify inspection reports. Darek kept uploading files as he spoke, knowing that every second of delay brought the agents closer to breaching his facility. 200,000 people have been drinking poisoned water because of your cost-cutting measures. The CEO's laugh was cold and calculating. Mr. Moncrief, you've been very thorough in your research, but you've failed to understand the larger picture. Meridian Industrial Solutions provides essential services to the Department of Defense. Our operations enjoy protection under national security provisions that supersede environmental regulations. The admission confirmed Darek's worst suspicions about the scope of the conspiracy. This wasn't just corporate crime hidden by regulatory capture. The contamination was happening with full government knowledge and protection, justified by military contracts that made environmental law irrelevant. Blackstone was calling to offer him a choice between cooperation and destruction, but the plasma cutters above suggested they'd already decided which option they preferred. Agent Harwick is operating under my direct instructions. We can end this situation peacefully if you agree to transfer your research files to our technical team and sign a national security non-disclosure agreement. Blackstone's tone carried the confidence of someone accustomed to buying solutions to inconvenient problems. Alternatively, your facility will be classified as a terrorist threat to national infrastructure, and Agent Harwick will be authorized to use any means necessary to secure potential weapons of mass destruction. The steel door above groaned under the cutting torch, and Darek realized he had perhaps 2 minutes before federal agents breached his sanctuary. Blackstone's offer represented a choice between personal survival and justice for Emma's memory, but the evidence upload was still running, and 3 years of work hadn't been completed yet. The quantum processors needed 90 more seconds to finish the contamination analysis that would prove deliberate poisoning of civilian water supplies under government protection. Darek ended Blackstone's call and watched his upload progress hit 100%, just as the steel door above exploded inward. Federal agents rappelled down the stairwell with tactical precision, their weapons drawn and night vision equipment scanning the sophisticated underground facility that was supposed to be an empty missile silo. Agent Harwick reached the bottom first, her expression shifting from professional determination to genuine shock as she saw the quantum processors, satellite communication arrays, and evidence chambers that lined the walls. "Mr. Moncrief, step away from all electronic equipment immediately. This facility is now under federal seizure for violations of national security laws." Harwick's voice carried new authority, but Darek could see uncertainty in her eyes as she processed the scale of his operation. "You're under arrest for unauthorized access to classified government systems and possession of restricted surveillance technology." Darek raised his hands but remained standing near his primary workstation, where green status lights confirmed that his evidence files had successfully transmitted to servers on 3 continents. "Agent Harwick, everything you see here was legally purchased and operated within my constitutional rights. The only classified information I accessed was publicly available through Freedom of Information Act requests." The agent moved closer, studying the banks of processing equipment that had been analyzing government data for 3 years. "This level of computational power requires federal licensing for civilian use. You've been operating an unlicensed intelligence gathering facility on American soil. Check your legal database, Agent Harwick. Computational power isn't regulated by federal law, and environmental monitoring is protected activity under whistleblower statutes." Darek gestured toward the evidence chambers containing printed documentation of the contamination conspiracy. "Everything in this facility documents crimes committed by Meridian Industrial Solutions with the knowledge and protection of federal agencies." Harwick hesitated, her tactical training conflicting with the legal reality of the situation. The equipment around her was sophisticated but not illegal. The activities Darek described were protected under federal law, and his facility was clearly designed for research rather than hostile operations. Her radio crackled with urgent communication from her field commander, demanding immediate seizure of all electronic equipment regardless of legal authority. "Agent Harwick, Harrison Blackstone just called me offering a deal to suppress my evidence in exchange for a national security classification. Your raid isn't law enforcement. You're here to protect corporate criminals from prosecution." Darek watched recognition dawn in her expression as she realized the true nature of her mission. The agent lowered her weapon slightly, speaking quietly to avoid her team's microphones. "Mr. Moncrief, if what you're saying is true, then this operation exceeds my legal authority, but my orders come from the highest levels of federal law enforcement." She paused, her training warring with her conscience. "I became an agent to protect people, not to help corporations poison them." Darek thought of Emma's final phone call, her voice weak from chemotherapy, as she begged him to find the truth about her neighborhood. "Agent Harwick, my sister died from cancer caused by contamination that your bosses helped cover up. Those orders were given to protect people who poisoned 200,000 Americans, including her." He pointed to his communication terminal, where status messages confirmed his evidence had been received by the Environmental Protection Agency Inspector General, the Department of Justice Public Corruption Unit, and investigative journalists at 3 major newspapers. "My evidence is already beyond your reach, and every action you take from this point forward will be scrutinized by federal prosecutors. You can choose which side of justice you want to be on." Agent Harwick made her choice in the space between heartbeats. She turned to her team and spoke with the authority of 15 years in federal law enforcement. "Stand down. This operation is terminated. Mr. Moncrief is operating within his legal rights, and we don't have proper authority for seizure." Her radio exploded with protests from her field commander, but she switched it off and faced Darek with newfound respect. "Mr. Moncrief, I need copies of everything you've transmitted. If federal agencies are protecting corporate criminals, then real law enforcement needs to clean house." Harwick holstered her weapon and gestured for her team to withdraw from the facility. "You've got my protection until this investigation reaches proper channels." 6 months later, Darek stood in a federal courtroom in Denver as Harrison Blackstone received a 20-year sentence for conspiracy, bribery, and environmental terrorism. Meridian Industrial Solutions had collapsed under a $2 billion judgment, and 14 federal employees faced corruption charges. The contaminated sites across 4 states were finally receiving proper cleanup under court supervision, funded by corporate assets seized through forfeiture proceedings. The victory had come at a personal cost. Corporate lawyers had spent months trying to discredit Darek's evidence and destroy his reputation. Death threats forced him to live under federal protection, and legal fees had consumed most of his savings. The isolation he'd originally sought had become a necessity for survival, but Emma's memory kept him fighting through the darkest moments of the investigation. Ezra Timberton approached Derek outside the courthouse, carrying legal documents that would change his client's life again. The Environmental Protection Agency wants to hire you as senior consultant for their new corporate crime division. Full security clearance, unlimited resources, and legal protection for your investigative methods. Derek looked across the Denver skyline toward the mountains, thinking about Emma and the neighborhood families whose suffering had started his crusade. His sister's death had transformed him from a reclusive engineer into someone who fought powerful interests that most people never knew existed. The government's attempt to breach his facility had failed not because of superior technology, but because truth was more powerful than intimidation when properly documented and transmitted. Ezra, tell them I accept, but I keep my silo. Some investigations require the kind of isolation that only exists 40 feet underground in the Montana wilderness. Derek shook his attorney's hand and walked toward his truck, where Agent Harwick waited to escort him back to his facility, which was now classified as a federal law enforcement resource, rather than a target for seizure. The drive back to Montana took 6 hours, during which Harwick briefed him on 3 new cases involving corporate environmental crimes that required his unique combination of technical expertise and constitutional protection. Derek realized his transformation was complete. He'd bought a nuclear silo to live alone and escape from society's problems, but society's problems had found him anyway and forced him to become exactly the kind of person who couldn't ignore injustice. As they approached his property, Derek saw the maintenance shed that had protected his operation during the federal raid. The silo beneath it would continue serving as his home and headquarters, but now his isolation served a larger purpose than personal peace. He'd learned that sometimes the most effective way to fight corruption was from the deepest underground bunker in America, armed with quantum processors, satellite communications, and the constitutional right to pursue truth regardless of who wanted it buried. Thanks for watching this story of justice and survival on the modern American frontier. Click the video on your screen to discover another thrilling tale of power, corruption, and determination in our modern West. Please subscribe to our channel and consider leaving a super chat to support our mission of bringing you new stories every week.